So we've done a lot of these sessions over the last couple of days now, talking a lot about security automation in the cloud, especially for our federal customers. We think it's super critical that folks understand. Number one, the baseline security authorizations that AWS provides, and also understands a lot of the tools and services that are either native or provided by partners like Palo Alto Networks in order to help customers secure their environments and achieve, the ultimate goal, if you're in the federal space, is to get a system authorization. So we're going to dive a little bit into, I'm going to take the first couple minutes to kind of dive a little bit, just a very quick recap of some of the security authorizations, accreditations Amazon's achieved, and how that helps you to facilitate as an Amazon customer, how it helps to facilitate you to get your system authorizations so that you can move your systems into production and that you can maintain a secure environment and not just have an environment that's secure for a few minutes or secure at the time that you got the accreditation, but is actually continuously monitored and secured over time. Because that's really the ultimate goal. So if you're in this room, I'm assuming that you probably have whatever organization you may be coming from, whether it's clicker, great.
Went one too far. There you go.
Yeah, whatever organization you might be coming from, you probably have to follow one of these security compliance regimes. If you're dealing with financial information, then you're probably really concerned about credit card information. You're probably very concerned about PCI DSS compliance. If you're obviously dealing with health information, then you have to definitely pay attention to HIPAA. And of course, if you're in the federal space, FedRAMP is key and critical. The good news is that, and of course, I think another important thing to call out is CGIS, right, for our federal government customers that are involved in law enforcement. The good news is that here at AWS, we've invested a ton of time, money, and energy and resources to ensure that these baseline security authorizations and accreditations are done within the AWS, are completed within the AWS infrastructure and services. So just a kind of a quick recap. Over the last 6-7 years, all of the AWS regions inside of the United States have achieved some level of FedRAMP compliance. The AWS US East and West regions are FedRAMP moderate, approved by the FedRAMP JAB, the Joint Authorization Board. And then, of course, the AWS GovCloud region has achieved FedRAMP High. And then within DoD, we've achieved Impact Levels 2, which is for your public information, Impact Level 4 for your sensitive data, your FOUO or CUI data, and then, of course, Impact Level 5 for unclassified national security systems and other types of sensitive data. And then from health information perspective, we've basically we're able to provide BAAs for a number of our services that you might want to use to store, process sensitive personal health information. Let's go to the next slide here. So, but one of the key critical things is that although AWS's baseline services and infrastructure might have standard security features in place, of course our facilities are secure. The physical security is up to federal standards or up to some other compliance regime standards. Even though we've done all that work, there's still work that you, the customer, have to do to secure your application in the cloud. Just because you put your data or you start launching servers inside of Amazon EC2 or S3, that doesn't automatically mean that you've checked all the boxes per se in order to achieve a system authorization. And when I first started working in the DoD side of the business, it was, of course, DoD, you had DIACAP, and now you have Risk Management Framework, DoD RMF. It typically took, and it still takes in a lot of cases, it could take anywhere from 6 to 9 to 12, and sometimes months, and sometimes even longer, to achieve that system ATO. And system authorization is ultimately what you're trying to achieve, whether your workload's in the cloud or outside of the cloud. And so we spent a lot of time over the last few years really focusing with both our services and working with our partners at Palo Alto Networks to really streamline this ATO process. And it's not just ensuring that you get the ATO, right, but it's also actually raising the bar and ensure that you can continuously monitor your workload, ensure that Typically when I used to do these things in DoD, I would when I wanted to get an ATO for a workload in a data center, typically what I would end up doing years ago is I work with the security team, I work with the network engineers, the system admins, and they would do a really, really good job, checking all the right boxes, doing the STIGs, turning on the right security features, and we would document all of that, and then more often than not, if we were to go and check in on that system a couple of weeks later, a month later, you would start to see a lot of configuration drift. You'd start seeing that you pull up the old network diagram, and all of a sudden, what's documented in that network diagram is not actually what's running inside of that data center. And so the good thing in the cloud, though, is you can get automatic visibility, and you get real-time visibility into everything that's operating and running. And Tim's going to talk through some of that, how that works, and how you can monitor and get really, really strong visibility and control over your infrastructure inside the cloud. So the ultimate goal, kind of close out on this piece for ATO compliance, is that Amazon, we're going to secure our baseline infrastructure. We're going to provide great physical security. We're going to secure our underlying services. We're going to document that for you, and then we're going to hand over to you, the customer, all of our body of evidence and documentation so that you can inherit the security controls that we've implemented for you. Because if you think about the system ATO process for like RMF, there might be 400 security controls that you have to implement or document for your auditors and for your authorizing official. Amazon, we're gonna take care of some of those controls for you. A lot of it's the physical security and the environmental controls. And then we're gonna give you documentation to show the controls that we've partially implemented, and then you guys can go ahead and secure your application and implement the rest of the controls. But we're gonna help get you started. So one of the things we've done to help you out is on our AWS public website, there's a quick start page. And in the quick start page, we've actually released CloudFormation templates for NIST and NIST-TI and for PCI DSS and some other compliance regimes. And we've actually also worked with our partners to release Palo Alto Networks, for example, to actually release templates that actually automatically deploy additional security automation tooling. So now you have a NIST-TI CloudFormation template that gets your initial VPC set up. It turns on basic security services like CloudTrail, turns on things like AWS config, and then you have other additional templates that can actually go and launch other security appliances like application-aware firewall from Palo Alto Networks, or other services that you may require for your ATO. And then the good thing is with both the services we natively provide and what Palo Alto provides with the Evident Continuous Monitoring platform is that you're not just secure the day that you documented that you implemented controls, you actually are continuously monitoring your environment to ensure that you have continuous security. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim to kind of dive deep a little bit more into all this stuff.
All right, cool. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. So what Jim said is kind of really important as probably the foundation of this discussion is security and compliance, and not only achievement but maintenance of ATO is an all-day, everyday thing, right? Security is not something you do once a year before the audit team shows up. It's also not something you do right before a bad guy tries to attack you. It's something you have to be prepared for and doing as part of your corporate DNA or your organizational DNA as an agency. The analogy I like to use for this one will probably be appreciated, which is I call it the cheeseburger analogy, right? I really, really wish I could get up and have a cheeseburger 3 meals a day, every day for 364 days a year, wake up day 365, have a salad, and go get a clean bill of health in my physical. That's just not how reality works. It's not how security and compliance works, right? It's something we have to work at, and we have to actually not only plan for and have a strategy, but we actually have to implement achievable strategy. And the implementation piece is often more important than the strategy itself, because a really good strategy that no one can maintain is completely ineffective. What Jim said earlier was there's a lot of things that Amazon has done right and has laid down the foundation that you can inherit from. Just because you put servers and data in AWS doesn't mean you're automatically going to pass all these compliance frameworks. What it means, though, is in the shared security responsibility model, you are able to inherit a lot of foundational controls about how they're managing data centers and access to those facilities, how they're managing the underlying PaaS services that you're actually doing. This controller loves to go forward. And from that, you're alleviating somewhere between 15 and 25% of your overall compliance burden, right? That's great if we can just shuffle that off and not have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. What it means is, instead of doing that, you can focus on the things that are important to your organization. Whatever your mission is, whatever your core security compliance goals are, whatever you need to do to achieve ATO that's unique to your organization or your agency, now becomes much more clear and much more focused, and you have the resources to achieve. You don't want to spread so thin that you try to do everything. You want to do several things very, very well. So the question then comes, who actually owns the process of establishing a proper security model and compliance inside an agency or organization? Who here thinks it's actually totally owned by your Chief Information Security Officer? Just get a raised show of hands. Nobody? Got one in the back. Who here thinks it's owned entirely by your risk and compliance or your audit team? Right? It's a good question. People aren't really sure who's responsible for it. The answer is everyone's responsible for it. If you take a look at what the role of the various people inside your organization or agency are going to be responsible for when you're looking at how you actually divide up the responsibilities and maintain it on an ongoing basis, you end up in a situation where your SecOps team, which is the most logical group that should actually be doing kind of everything, is also the group that is least effectively set up to do it, right? They don't always have full access rights to every host and every application. In fact, they shouldn't under many of the policies. Instead, when you divide up this responsibility and you start looking at how you automate and manage these things, your SecOps team is actually your advisorship. They're like the mentors and the guides. They're not the people that are going to go out and execute and achieve everything. They just can't do it. And as organizations and agencies achieve velocity, I don't know if you watched the video that was playing in here on Loop before, they talk about iterative rapid development and real-time analysis and access to data and distribution of that action on a real-time basis. You can't have SecOps people as gates in between each of those workflows. They have to set up a series of policies and frameworks, trust they're going to operate technically, and then allow the organizational mission to continue. From a DevOps standpoint, ironically, people often will attribute the engineering or the software engineering aspects of the organization as the people you trust least with security. In the modern model, they're actually the people you need to trust most. And it's not because they don't want to do all the things that your organization requires for security policy. It's often they don't have the experience to do all those things. They don't have the authority to define what those things are they should be doing and implement them without someone outside giving them guidance. But it's never, I don't care about security. I've been doing this almost 30 years. I've never heard an engineer say, I don't care about security. There's usually some reason they had to not achieve part of the security implementation. And the trade-off is usually time to achieve distribution of software and technology, time to market, resourcing, this feature out-prioritize this feature. This team is actually doing true CI/CD in a lot of your cloud environments. There's no better place for you to loop in the DNA of security and compliance, especially ATO achievement, than into your DevOps teams. They are the people that treat everything like a break-fix situation. Security is a break-fix situation. Your risk and compliance team is your shield. Everyone refuses to take these people to lunch or hang out with them. They're kind of like the leper colony of security. These are the biggest ally you're going to have in this industry. They're the ones that are going to be the shield between your team operating and moving the needle forward, this controller, and the outside audit bodies that want to come in and validate what's going on. If you can equip them with what they need to answer and validate for third parties, those third parties will never penetrate and hit your part of the organization. They're not going to disrupt engineering teams. They're not going to disrupt operational teams. Those day-to-day functions continue to move and move quickly. And the risk and compliance teams take care of the, for lack of a better word, paperwork piece. In a CISO situation, really this is your politician. They are out there evangelizing what's going on in your organization as far as what the mission is, how you're going to achieve ATO, how you're going to maintain ATO, how your security and compliance strategy is actually being effective and not just checked off on a piece of paper and then forgotten for 12 more months. And finally, the program lead or the CXO, this is your executive sponsor and the logic, right? They're the ones that say, we have to do these things because our mission dictates X, Y, and Z, or our business needs us to do A, B, and C. They are the one that connects why we do things and how we do things with the rest of the team. So then the question kind of becomes, if we know who's responsible and it's a divided responsibility, how often do they have to actually execute on this responsibility? Who in here is doing annual audits? Anyone? All right, good number of hands. Who here's doing daily audits? I didn't see any hands go up, right? There's a big difference between I locked the door to my house last March and I locked it this morning as far as my security and risk profile. You're going to trust me to have like your big screen TV that I borrowed in my house that I locked this morning and not that I locked last March. This means your commitments that you convey to third parties, whether it be a commercial organization with customers trusting you with data like medical records or credit card information, whether it be a database of citizens' social security numbers and health and insurance histories, whether it be mission critical data to active operations happening around the world. If you can't put your finger on exactly what the security of those environments is today, and are we actually maintaining not only the controls we need to trust that our systems are operating correctly, but also technically report back on them to our stakeholders, we're doing ourselves a disservice, right? We have all the capability to do this, and the only thing between actually doing it and where a lot of people stand today is the idea that we can do this without having to go hire 200 more people. It's something you can do through automation, and we can actually take an effective move on. This is a stat that I'd like to validate here. How many people here feel that you have at least some kind of agile development happening in some part of your org? Not all of your workloads, right? Look, if you guys look around, that's a lot of hands. How many are actually doing agile compliance? I want to talk to you afterwards. In a good way, don't worry. It's something a lot of people don't think about. It's usually the thing that's like, oh, that happens over in the basement, and we don't want to think about what's going on there. But it actually is very enabling for teams. If you could have a mission-critical need that pops up, and you know that you can deploy infrastructure in AWS to support that mission in less than an hour using like a Terraform or CloudFormation template to roll out one of these predefined secure by design frameworks, why can't you have within that hour validation that you can actually operate this for mission-critical data? The only thing standing between you and that is automation. So I want to take a look at like the classic compliance management, and I'm going to drive this nail home so we all agree on this. Come on. People will start measuring kind of like mid-summertime, knowing that most audits are going to happen in September, October. A couple weeks start measuring, panic starts to set in and goes, hey, that time's ticking by real fast. So you start getting more people to help. People stop doing their day-to-day job. They start basically focusing on this. There's a lot of email moving around, right? Everyone starts to really freak out because we realize there's people that have dates and meetings on the calendar for when auditors are going to show up and start asking us hard questions. We're going to sit with auditors and we're going to pray to whatever deity we believe. It could be Andy Jassy, it could be, one of the old Sun guys. Whoever you think is going to help you, they're not going to help you. And then we're going to spend weeks basically recovering and licking our wounds from what the auditors came in and told us we didn't do right? This is a classic but unrecognized tech debt issue. If this were, we made conscious decisions in the way we built our software, knowing it wouldn't scale and we had to go back and fix it later, no one would be surprised. When it comes to actually measuring the way that everyone outside of our organization perceives and trusts us, it's kind of ironic that we don't pay more attention to how this actually works. I've got a lot of people taking pictures. I'll give you about another 20 seconds to get the enjoyment out of this. Email this all over because everyone that sees it is going to think this is some kind of joke, but it's actually reality. And you can all testify to that. What Jim mentioned earlier was also, outside of this process, once you've done all the question and answering and fixing, then you still often have 6 to 12 months to get your ATO, even an initial ATO, right? From when you actually had a need, if this was mission critical, to an ATO being 18 to 24 months away, like chances are that mission's either already over or we've moved past and have lost an opportunity to really influence, saving human life, protecting economies, protecting individuals and citizens around the nation, right? Around the world. So the question is, how do you manage that backlog or that technical debt? Obviously, the answer is going to be you have to do the same way you do CI/CD with software development. You have to do continuous compliance and continuous monitoring, right? As you're iterating software and you're building and deploying and looking at basically what is fundamentally the scientific method of software development, at the time we're actually analyzing not only the performance characteristics and the data coming out of the applications and services, we're also going to be analyzing what's going on in our cloud environments. Are we deploying and creating configuration drift because we're mismanaging and not doing proper source control on our templates. We don't have proper validation around Terraform or CloudFormation, and we keep rolling out the same regressive security group change or the same improper machine image that's not STIG hardened, for example. In those situations, people are going to manually go in and triage. They're going to go in, they're going to fix the template, they're going to hopefully check it back in. That would solve this problem if people just do a commit. And then they're going to go redeploy that infrastructure. And within a few minutes, you actually see all the telemetry come back and say, hey, look, our systems are actually back in compliance. The most meaningful thing you're going to show anyone that cares about security and compliance is that you actually detect and solve your own problems without someone else telling you. And this is exactly what that is. It's a feedback system. Who in here is a software engineer by trade, right? What do we call the system that tells you if your code can run or not? If you do compiled code, I apologize, I should have qualified it. If you have a compiler and you try to run your workload code and it says, oh, you're missing the curly brace, you're missing the semicolon, we're not going to run this. What do? You go back and you fix it and you rerun it and you're like, hey, look, everything works, we're happy. Fundamentally, what you're building is you're building an infrastructure compiler for the cloud. You're going in and creating automation that says, these are the parameters in which we'll run our workloads, and we'll actually validate that we're doing the things we're doing for the authority. That's not the best way to do it, because you notice I said people when I said who was automating, who was managing and remediating the issues, right? Nobody here has enough people to do all the things on your calendar. And in fact, when we plan for resourcing, we don't plan for the unknown. So you'll have fires that pop up or emergencies or reprioritization that happens, and that means we have to change our plans. Ultimately, the goal here is to get to a known state where you say, these are very clear boundaries around how we're going to operate our environment. These are very clear measurements we're going to manage and use, and we're going to ensure those things never deviate, right? It's pretty simple to say, I don't want any of my PII data published to the internet. That's a pretty common goal across, I think, every compliance framework and common sense. So in the event that my buckets that are marked as PII are enabled to be public, I want to leverage something like an Amazon Lambda to take feedback in, for example, a pub sub feed of metadata when I detect that that bucket is in there with the bucket name, and I want Lambda to go mark it private again. So this is a very simplistic, atomic way to go in and build a library of enforcement and automation around what you're actually doing with people today. And then if you get people off of doing that, which I call the kind of the Homer Simpson approach to security, which is I keep pushing the button so the nuclear reactor doesn't blow up, right? And we want those people to go start actually building better systems and technology and moving the needle forward, then we have to do this. If we don't, we're going to be on the same treadmill we've been on for I don't know how many decades at this point. So let me give you an example. Let me give you kind of a simple 4 or 5 step process here. The Evident product's doing continuous monitoring and evaluation of your cloud environments, right? As we detect something like that S3 bucket being marked public that also contains your PII, we can actually fire a real-time pub sub off to a Lambda function. At the same time, we've notified the Lambda function to execute and remediate the issue. We've also published the event to your SIM system like a Splunk or a Sumo Logic. We've also opened a ticket for your compliance team to track a deviation and a risk that has entered your environment. We've also notified your DevOps team in Slack or HipChat, their chat ops system, so they know there's a problem. So if a person has to actually look at this and track it to resolution, they can. And then as we detect in real time the fix that has occurred and the environment coming back into compliance with the state and the ATO, we can actually go back and close the ServiceNow ticket and update the DevOps team to let them know that this problem has automatically been resolved, right? That kind of simple stimulus and control puts you in a situation where now you can not only go in and take a look at your ticketing system and pull all the compliance deviations and do kind of a mean time to response and a mean time to SLA for getting back in compliance, but you can do this all day, every day without somebody having to go basically track this in a spreadsheet or track this in a notebook and subject it to human error. This is the way that you actually get out of the treadmill of manually triaging problems in compliance and manually maintaining ATO. This is the way that you get in a situation where each time you think of a new way to control the environment or to establish enforcement policies, you codify them, you put them in your source control system and your continuous monitoring system, and you go back on about your day thinking about new problems and new areas to improve. Using this, let's take a look at what the new ATO timeline is, right? Say you start September 15th. If you remember, we started in July last time, the start of July. Now we can be lazy. We all get to have summer vacation because everyone wants that. Start September 15th, right? We've been looking all year long at what the state of compliance for our environment is because we're tracking it every few minutes and rolling up reporting by the hour to our constituents. We're in measurement for just 2 weeks. And ATO is done and approved because there's no question that the controls are technically measurable. We can validate what's being measured. We can see the history of deviation and enforcement happening and remediation. We have a functional security program, right? We're actually achieving Agile compliance. Sorry, I saw you trying to snap a picture of that. This controller likes to just roll forward on its own, so. Right? It's about making small incremental changes and improvements. It's not about big bangs anymore. Compliance was a lot about big bang. Once a year, everyone in the war room, let's go solve this problem. Net new workload coming online, let's all get together and figure out how to get an ATO, even an initial ATO for something in development. It's a huge resource drain, right? These improvements that happen over time are alleviating that technical debt we're building around compliance. As you get to a fully compliant state, this is where the cheeseburger analogy pays off, right? You want to stay in that state. You don't want to regress and have to start the treadmill all over a year later. So you now have small incremental changes as your environment kind of, for lack of a better word, mutates and organically grows and shifts over time. You're on top of it and you're aware of what's changing and how you're going to manage it. It's not a decision you wait until an auditor tells you to think about. So I want to do a little math because I think some people dramatically underestimate how much time automation can actually save you in these cloud environments. And when you think about the massive scale infrastructures running in a cloud like AWS, there are not teams and teams of people sitting there pushing buttons and launching servers and doing all these things. A lot of this is being done by automated deployment systems. A lot of this is being elastically scaled. People are being smart about how they want their workloads to change and grow over time. And then they're stepping back and letting those, not theories, but policies kind of prove themselves out. And where those policies don't work, people go in and they iterate and change. And where they really do work, people pay attention, they get more granular, and they get smarter about how they operate. So I will challenge Jim for a second. Jim, how long would it take you to go verify a particular security control is in place in AWS if I were to give you a laptop and a CLI and say, go show me that I am doing KMS key rotation, for example?
Yeah, and the CLI?
Yeah.
Almost, well, I have to type in the command and I have to, execute it. So, a second or two, yeah.
You're fast. I'll tell you, you're fast. Knowing me, I would look at the CLI and say, okay, well, AWS came, and you're like, then question mark, and you're looking through the commands, and you're trying to figure it out. Oh, I'm in the wrong account, let me change my key file. Usually you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of, 2 minutes if you're fast to 3 to 5 minutes if you're slow. So we kind of split the difference here and said, let's say 2.5 minutes for you to manually go validate everything and make sure that it matches up, right? We took a basic account from a customer, one Amazon account, there's 35 controls in a framework that were being measured, right? And these are being measured all day, every day, continuously. Came back with 9,534 control checks. So remember, these checks are happening not once for the whole account, but sometimes per resource, per EC2 instance, per S3 bucket, per load balancer, per network route. At 2.5 minutes per, that's almost 400 hours. So that's take one person from your team for 10 weeks to go do that one cycle, or take 10 people from your team and go do it for 1 week. I don't think either of those is a winning situation, right? Now what happens in the time at which they're doing this exercise? If you're running a real CI/CD environment and you're having elastic workloads, your environment's changing in process as they're going and validating these controls and trying to prove the compliance and ATO state of the environment. So in the event that they get done and they come give you the report, chances are, 1, half of the things they found are gone. 2, half the resources they found, if they're elastic servers, are gone. And the paper's not worth what it's printed on. For your organization, you have to have up-to-the-minute data, and you have to have up-to-the-minute assertions that you guys are doing the right things. Because it's cool to prove, once again, you were good in history, but if I show up to ask you how you're doing now, history is not a very good barometer to tell me how your program's operating. We have a customer who likes to be very vocal about their FedRAMP process. Jive is an organization that builds collaborative systems for distributed organizations, whether it be government agencies, whether it be healthcare organizations, or whether it be banks or technology companies. They do a lot of business with the federal government, especially enabling distributed teams to have real-time collaboration on mission documents, on intelligence, on any number of internal personnel issues. One of the things that Matt said is that he couldn't do his job without ESP, and he doesn't mean Sixth Sense or his second sight. He means Evidence Security Platform, which was the name of the product at the time he gave us this quote. He basically had to, as a single individual, set off to get FedRAMP Moderate done in their GovCloud environment for their customers with little more than, here's a budget and here's your head count of you, go knock it out of the park, right? He knew the only way to achieve this is with automation, and the only way to achieve it while he's still doing all the other things that he does in his day-to-day job, right? I don't think any of us gets off the hook from our day job with incremental new projects and work like this. They're doing constant continuous measurement and remediation of things to make sure that not only are they FedRAMPed when they're getting assessed, but they're maintaining that all day, every day, because they know that their customers are continuously using the software, putting data in the platform, and they're not putting data in the platform thinking that, hey, they'll be FedRAMP next March. They're putting data in the platform thinking, hey, these guys have all the right controls in place right now, right? It's a mentality shift that you take from the old way of how we used to approach this with people and leveraging technology and automation to make sure that not only can we verify where we are, but we can actually enforce what we want to have happen without having to sit at the keyboard and do it manually. The days where we were all butts in seats are kind of over. So from the Palo Alto Networks family kind of standpoint, when we look at the cloud, we look at a number of different approaches and cloud security capabilities that help you get to this kind of continuous automation and enforcement. You heard Jim mention that we have templated deployments for things like the VM series to do inline traffic inspection, inline malware prevention, all those kinds of things you have to do at the network level to achieve a lot of those checkboxes in your various certification frameworks. You can also leverage the Evident platform to go in and basically do full continuous assessments of your environments and start triggering the incident response workflows that make sense for your organization. And then the Traps technology, which will actually live on the endpoints for those of you that still have endpoints, and make sure that in the transition to whatever the next stage is for your organization or your application, be it containers or serverless, you have the visibility across the entire attack surface and the entire risk surface of your workloads. It's the only organization on the planet that can deliver this capability conjoined with AWS's built-in controls. If you were to take a look at what can be done between the Palo Alto suite of technologies and what can be done with Amazon's technologies, we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% of your core controls being taken off your plate. And we're going to leave you ones with the fun ones. What are your hiring practices? Is everyone a citizen or validated by Homeland? Like all the fun things you have to do to verify that the softer intangibles are done correctly. But the technical controls are all not only being validated, but being measured and continuously enforced throughout the whole life cycle of your workload, which is kind of the important part. You don't want to invest in something and then come back a month later and realize you're doing all the work you thought you were getting taken care of. That's why you trust partners like Amazon and Palo Alto Networks to help you along this journey. So I'm going to open up for Q&A. We actually left a good amount of time because I think one supposition that Jim will join me up here and I had is we probably have a very diverse group as far as not only compliance frameworks that are represented, but also varying levels of ATO for various workloads or organizations. So for those of you who are operating in AWS, especially GovCloud or commercial or any of the other regions, we'd love to hear either something you guys have to say about what it was like to achieve ATO or compliance, or answer any questions you may have about that. Yes, sir.
I got a quick question about the last one you mentioned.
Yes.
Wait for the mic.
Sorry, we have a mic coming to you right now. Sorry. He's had to walk a long way.
You referenced 60% of the controls.
Depending on framework, you can get in there.
Do you mean that you are we're inheriting your controls, or do you mean that inherent in what you're doing, we're more efficient in remediating for those controls?
It's both. So from the Amazon side, you'll inherit controls from the platform because you can't actually control or see those. So you bring those up into your scope, and they provide the body of evidence and data there. On the partner side, we're giving you the capability to actually enforce the other remainder set of those controls. And then you're responsible for kind of the white space at the top, which is things specific to your application and data flows, things specific to your organizational or agency practices around personnel and security and physical security things that neither of us would have the
Yeah.
purview into that you're going to be doing anyways.
Yeah, technical security controls, like in a DoD system ATO package, you're going to get about 20% of the controls fully inherited from us. And again, these are technical security controls. You got to remember too that, you know, like a lot of control statements, a lot of the security controls are actually policy documentation, as Tim said.
Yep.
But when you start layering on top of our baseline services with partner products and you start turning on things like VPC flow logs and some of the other features that we have, then now you're starting to get closer to 60% or more of technical security controls being implemented very easily.
And the nice thing is over time that will increase as more capability comes online from the provider and the partners, but also from your organization. You're actually going to grow some automation chops and some homegrown applications that will solve for other parts of the equation. And pretty soon you're off of kind of the paperwork treadmill of people doing everything. And that efficiency means you have your organization focused on the things that are meaningful to the mission in your organization as opposed to kind of what ends up being a little bit of overhead.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How are both AWS or Palo Alto working with DHS on the CDM program to make their data and other things available so that they can be folded in DHS's CDM?
Yeah. No, certainly from the AWS perspective, you know, so we have a lot of native tooling like CloudTrail config, flow logs that feeds data into a variety of different CDM type of programs. Certainly with the DHS's specific CDM program, we are collaborating with them. And we could talk more about it offline.
Yeah. From the same point on the Palo Alto Network side, the Evident product itself came out right around the exact same time the CDM paper was published in draft. And so you'll find a lot of similarity between the actual paper itself and what the technology actually achieves.
Yep.
And that just comes from, we both had good ideas of what practice looks like as you get into a programmatic world. As far as authorization on CDM for like funds to be used for procuring the technology, we should talk offline about that. We've been in touch pointed in a few different ways with DHS, and I can give you some more details.
Yeah.
Does AWS has AWS crosswalk these solutions, let's just say, for example, Splunk or Lambda or AWS CloudWatch, to say that if you integrate these solutions within your environment, these will satisfy X number of RMF controls?
Yeah, well, so one of the things we did with the Quick Start that we think is very, very useful for customers is if you go on our website with the NIST 853 Quick Start, we actually showed that if you turn on these features, here's security controls that because you ran this CloudFormation template and turned on these features, you've now implemented these RMF controls. And sometimes they're fully implemented, sometimes it's partially implemented because there might be some things you have to do on your side. So we have done that crosswalk. We actually put a whole Excel spreadsheet out there on our website crosswalking NIST RMF controls and how they're implemented. Now, as far as partner products and how they crosswalk to some of the controls, we have worked with partners like Palo Alto to do similar crosswalks, and we have some of those spreadsheets available. Although they're not on the website, they are available privately that we can share one-on-one. And really what it is we give you these, what we're trying to do is save you time, right? We're giving you a representative security control statement that you could actually use and copy and paste and put in your own controls documentation. Now, we hope that over time that controls documentation is going to move farther away from cut and paste and is going to automatically get filled out based off of technical security controls you've implemented. That's really where we're all trying to lead towards, right? Is that we get away from, you know, hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation, and that we have a baseline understanding that you know, Amazon or Palo Alto networks, they develop a technical security function in their product, and if you turned it on, that's going to automatically signal into your compliance monitoring system to say, okay, this is implemented now, and it's going to fill it out for you, so we can kind of move away from the paperwork, and now you have more of a dashboard that's live. That's really what you want to get to, is this kind of more of this live dashboard of what your security state is.
Have you been able to apply your approach with the ESP, not just to the conventional workloads that we know today in these federal clouds, but specifically things more ephemeral, right, like containers, and managing, you know, consistent mutability that some of the other speakers here this week have talked about, relative to understanding the changes, that occur as they move cross domain, what they're calling pedigree and provenance of a container, and then actually ATOing these type of, pods and workflows.
Yep. So from that standpoint, at a container like platform level, if you're using something like ECS and AWS or something along those lines, we're able to take a look across the deployed fleet of containers and ensure that you're using like the correct container types, things like that, as to what's happening inside the container that requires a deeper presence, and that would be something that you would see from like the Palo Alto Traps product, which is meant to be deployed into the workload operational runtime. We're looking at the structural infrastructure and past services surrounding the runtime. So by layering those things together, you're going to get that visibility. And then we would be able to, in the future, suck those controls down out of traps and model it into frameworks for you. Today, it doesn't occur, so.
Did I hear you correctly? You have an agent for runtime monitoring?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
You have an agent available to?
Correct. The Palo Alto Traps product is an agent that also does things like EDR. Other questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
So you've talked about automating the controls based on the, what you're bringing into it, but maybe this goes a little bit more towards your point about getting rid of all the documentation or reducing the documentation, automating it. How do I tie the types of data and the types of uses and the types of users in so that I can ease that process to make sure that I'm applying the right controls to the right types of data? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, so certainly you have certain types of data that are more sensitive than other types of data, so you get to the data categorization. Yes. So one of the things we're starting to do, we didn't talk about in this presentation, is Amazon Macy, which is a service that we've now implemented around Amazon S3 that helps categorize data based off of, first of all, if you grant the service access, it'll actually scan your S3 buckets, and it'll start looking at the data and categorizing it using natural language processing, machine learning, and so you can start to pick out data that's really sensitive, like credit card numbers, PII data. If you're in the U.S. government, you might be looking for portion markings for classified documents. You could use regular expressions to kind of say this data is more sensitive. So now we have Macy, which is actually going to categorizing data. Now that you understand what your data is, you can actually trigger other systems to again go and say, we need to apply this security policy to this S3 bucket. Or if these type of users are accessing this data in a pattern that seems suspicious, we need to shut that access off. And so now you can now that you know what your data is and what the most sensitive data is, you can apply the appropriate policies to it, but you also can keep a closer eye on it, right? I mean, there's just certain types of data that, again, it's not that we're all suspicious of the people that work for us, right? Most people are just trying to do their job and trying to, go to work and do good things, but, and people make mistakes too, right? So people will make mistakes, and we want to be able to detect that type of thing. So that's some of the things we're starting to do, and I think we'll see more of that stuff from us and from our partners.
Yeah. Similarly, we have a capability that does kind of DLP-like classification as well of data. And I think what's important about that is no matter where you're getting that kind of support from, triggering the workflow to actually make sure you're properly tagging and identifying the data so that other systems are aware of what it is. You have to think that the ability to create metadata tags and to identify systems and data based on classifications and access rights is kind of foundational to the ability for other automated systems to actually understand and interpret the context of what's going on. Otherwise, everything's a server and everything's a data file. And automation's not good at doing that processing in a shell script or a Lambda function because it doesn't have the memory and capacity and runtime to go do that deep of an analysis. You could always trigger the Amazon machine learning capabilities and other technologies as well and do it yourself. But instead of rolling your own, you can leverage a lot of the built-in capability and then tag it as what the data type is, and then let the automation carry the rest forward for you and focus on that piece that's unique to your business. This other half of the logic's not unique to you, so you shouldn't try to build that.
Question for you on the full automation. I've been sitting here and on the Agile certification, which is really on the recertification once you're fully got your ATO. Can you talk to the level of effort that you've seen customers to achieve the full automation that you're getting to? There seems to be an assumption that infrastructure as code and this automation just magically happens, which is the pixie dust, to actually achieve that full automation, to then allow you the Agile compliance?
Yeah, thank you for the question, because I think what you've touched on is something that I have it's an interesting touch point for me and something I'm passionate about, which is it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Nobody that comes up on this stage, not Jim nor I, is going to come in and say, we woke up on Tuesday and we automated everything and we were done.
Yeah.
It has organically grown in your organization over time, and it is done in the in-between periods of fires and projects and things that are already in flight. Nobody stops what they're doing and goes and does this. It's just not realistic. So to be realistic, what we tell people, what we've seen, is by making it part of the planning and software development lifecycle, where in the meeting you're sitting down to talk about the next release, if it's an Agile or a sprint plan or whatever, you say, what are the 2 things we're going to automate for security this time around? You're going to build a library of these capabilities over time that becomes just like your code base for your technology, right? It's iterative, it's always there. If a developer leaves, it stays there, it's self-documented and can be built on by the next body that comes and fills the seat if you have to. And in a world where contractors are used a lot, that's a really important thing. And you're going to build it over the course of more like 12 months, not 2 months. Now, I've seen organizations build a tiger team and attack it really aggressively and use some professional services help and things like that to get it done. The result is there's always more to do. And so what you have to do is get into a cadence of building this stuff and expanding it over time, because there's never, quote, done. There's always something else you want to do or you want to achieve. And as the world's changing, the platform's growing, your workload's growing, new workloads come online. You might buy a company that has a workload in the cloud. You're going to have to keep iterating over time. So getting in that muscle memory of that iterative behavior
and the culture, right? It's getting the right culture in place to implement and really believe in these principles.
And a lot of times that's a tip of the spear thing. Someone's going to say, we're going to do this, and you're going to prove it works, and everyone else has the aha moment and goes, oh, that makes so much sense, we should have done it. It's the same group that was like, that'll never work, like 6 weeks ago in a meeting, but they'll see it work, and when you can prove it from inside, where they know they can say, hey, look, we can do that too, and we can see your code, then it starts to become more viral and scale. And you guys see this a lot, especially on your side of the house.
Yeah, we absolutely see it. And again, it's a cultural thing, and then you have to start out small in iterations, and none of this stuff ever happens overnight. Especially, in the Defense Department, we've seen a lot of organizations that have actually, they talk about getting an ATO in a day, right? And that's a goal, right? It's a place to get to, right? Is that going to happen overnight? Of course not. An ATO in a day is not going to happen overnight, but it's something to strive for. It's something to build. If you have a culture that's kind of built around this concept, right, that's what we're trying to achieve, then you can kind of iteratively getting there. Any other questions? We still got time for 1 or 2 more.
Yes, sir.
It's really refreshing to see more and more vendors are coming out with tools to automate the ATO process from the compliance standpoint. My observation has been more on actually taking those evidence and reports to actually map it to the SSP and actually describe how your reports actually I would say, fulfill all those various control families and the documentation that goes into SSP. I believe that's where most of the time is going to satisfy the auditor's expectations, because they don't have the time to sit and parse through everything that the tool is producing. So how do you tackle that in the real world? I mean, while I think this is great, I still feel like there is a gap between what the tool is producing to where we want to be from what auditors are expecting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pain the first time through, no matter what, right? Yeah. Auditors becoming more familiar. Like the first time they saw AWS, they all freaked out. This will never work, right? Yes. Like they have to become familiar with the technology and the output. And when you look at technically measurable controls that contain the data that they're measuring, it's important because an auditor who's savvy enough can read what's happening and see the output result and say, I trust the machine because it's going to give me a binary answer, it's true or false, right? So they're going to develop that comfort zone. Out of the gate, they're going to be suspicious, right? And so you're going to still do some manual work, but the next time you do a recertification of ATO, or you go from your initial to your fully provisioned one, it's going to be a lot easier because they're going to be like, oh, I've seen this before, I know how to deal with this. Okay, show me these things. It's once again iterative, it's cultural, and it gets better with time. We're very early, right? Yeah. We're early in that ATO going from 18 months to 6 months to 1 month to hopefully a week and then a day. And they're on the journey with us. Like they may seem adversarial across the table, but they're in it with us learning and growing along the way. And you can take that feedback and bring it back to partners to improve the technology so it satisfies more of those questions for you. But you can also improve the expectation. You can work with Amazon to help massage some of these auditors into understanding what they're actually looking at and seeing.
Yeah, we're spending a ton of time right now with auditors, really just sitting down. First of all, working backwards from what their end goal is, their end state. What are they trying to get done, and then is there a better way to do it or a way that we can improve that process? And it's iterative. This is still day one. This is very much absolutely day one here. But I think what you've seen here over the last hour is this is what we're all trying to get to. The tools are here. Start using them. Start iterating on them. And one day we'll all be, coming in here and we'll be complaining about something else, all right? So thanks for everyone for your time. We'll be off the side of the stage if you have any other questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the summit.